Oregon football just dropped this insane motion graphic for their recent game against Georgia, and people on Twitter were going crazy for it. Now, today on the channel, I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to recreate this graphic yourself. I'm going to walk you through After Effects and Photoshop and everything you need to know to create this exact look. At the end of the video, I'm even going to give you the After Effects project files if you want to create something just like this using the files that we create in this video. If that sounds great, drop a like on this video and let's jump in. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the designer that created this. His name is Connor Hinkle. Connor Hinkle does graphics and motion design for Oregon football and I think Oregon athletics as a whole. I just have to say, Connor is leading the game right now as far as motion graphics in college sports. Some of the stuff that he puts out at Oregon is quite honestly just the best out. And so I always love looking to see what he's putting out in terms of content and things like that. It truly is game changing. Now I'm going to be focusing on this motion graphic in particular today. I just want to walk through the entire process and maybe help those of you that are more familiar with Photoshop get acclimated to After Effects and some of the cool stuff that you can do in After Effects that's relatively easy to do. Now to start off, I'm going to look at this behind the scenes breakdown that Connor posted on his Twitter account. You can see here that he essentially has three main elements. So we have the Mercedes-Benz cutout itself. We have this Oregon football player that is essentially just a rotoed in video shot that they took. You can tell they filmed this intentionally with this in mind, it seems like. And then the animated text in the background. And then on top of that, there are a few other small effects, but we'll worry about those a little bit later. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to start off with the animation in the background, just because I feel like that's probably one of the hardest steps. And so diving into that is a good way of beginning. So I'm going to open up After Effects. When you first open up After Effects, this is the screen that you'll see. And I'm just going to start off by hitting New Composition, and I'm going to make my width 1080 and my height 1080. Now you can play around with this, but it looks like this original design was a square. And so keeping these dimensions roughly the same is what I would recommend. These are all of my settings. If you want to pause the video and check those out, feel free to go through and do that. I'm just leaving the frame rate at 29.97 right now. I'm gonna hit OK. And you can see that'll open up a blank composition for me. So to start off, I'm gonna focus on getting this game day animation in. So you can kind of see the text pops up and kind of animates in letter by letter in a fun way. So for starters, I'm just gonna go here and hit Layer, New Text, and then I'm just going to type in game day. I'm going to scale this up a little bit by just dragging to the right on my text box. And that's great. Now I'm going to look for a font that is kind of tall and thin, kind of like he used for this original graphic. So I'm going to scroll through my fonts. I think initially I was going to use a font called Robinson. If you're not familiar, Robinson is a font that Georgia football used about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it's an awesome font that I definitely recommend checking out. So I'm going to scale it to about this point, and you can see here we have pretty much all we need. Now, one thing I do want to note, I do have some kerning in here. So I have it set to about 25 just to give more spacing in between my letters. You can simply go to your character box on After Effects and then look for the VA symbol and just drag that to the right to about 25. Now, don't worry if you don't have your character box. You can simply go to Window and then hit Character, and that'll open up in After Effects right there. If we go back to the original video, you can truly tell that each letter is animated in individually. Now, we could go through the painstaking process of actually going letter by letter, but there's actually a really simple tool that we can do to automate this. I'm just going to go to Effects and Presets, and then I'm just going to type in by character. Essentially what this does is brings up all the After Effects animation presets that have anything that fades in by character, which is what we want. By character, of course, meaning by each individual letter. Now, there are a couple of different options here, and I think I'm going to try the drop in by character. So I'm going to hit my spacebar, and you can kind of see the letters animate in like that. Super simple. And you can just see it's just going straight down. Now, this is clearly not the effect that they had here, so we're going to need to tweak this a little bit. You can see it's animating up, not down. So I'm going to start off by going to my drop down here on my layer tab, and we're going to hit Text and then go down to Animator Range Selector. And here you can see we have some cool tools that we can use to animate this in our own way. Now for starters, we have this design going from up top to down below, and we want to flip that. So all I'm going to do is take these keyframes and just switch positions. So now you can see my letters are fading up the way I wanted them to. Now while I do that, I'm going to go ahead and drag my position down a little bit. I can hit P on my keyboard with that layer selected and just simply drag that down, just to make sure the position is where I want it to be. Now I'll hit the play button again, and you can see those letters are slowly fading up. Now I want to continue playing around with these animator effects. So I'm going to go back to text, animator, range selector. And now we're going to hit the advanced dropdown. Now advanced gives me some different capabilities here. For starters, I'm going to turn on this random order button. So I turn that on, and now when we play, you can see the letters will fade up randomly, just like the Oregon football video. I'll go back for reference. You can kind of see here, each one just randomly fades up. So now we have the letters fading up randomly, but we want to play around a little bit with the flow of the letters to make it feel a little bit more smooth in the animation. So here there's this slider called Ease High. I'm going to turn that up to about 60%. And what you'll notice is that really eases in the animation here to make it look nice and smooth. Now overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the way this looks, but the animation is kind of slow compared to what they did on the Oregon football design. And so to fix this, all I'm going to do is go to these keyframes and just simply drag them closer together. So when you drag it closer together, it takes the two endpoints and compresses them, ultimately making the animation a little bit faster. I'll play that for you now. Something like that. I might even speed it up just a tad bit more. That looks pretty good. Now that we have the game day text effect, we want to add the text on top. I'm going to hit layer, new text, and I'm going to type in Ducks versus Bulldogs. And I need to go through and double check to make sure that's right. Yep. Now, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go through and just use Russo 1 as a font. This is a free font I believe you can get on Google, so if you don't have this font, I highly recommend downloading it. I'm just going to click and position it up here. Now I'm going to hit align just to make sure it's horizontally aligned, and that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go back and double check. It looks like this is actually a tad bit smaller. Super easy to fix. We can actually just hit S on our keyboard, and that'll bring up this scale button, and we can simply just scale this down. Something like that looks pretty good. Now you'll notice this is also animated in. It just kind of fades in by word. So I'm going to go back to After Effects. I'm going to go to my effects presets and just type in by word. For this, I'm just going to type in blur by word, and we'll just see how it looks. And hit U. When you hit U on your keyboard, it actually just brings in the keyframes. So when I hit U, I'm able to see all these keyframes and just drag them up. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna just kind of configure the animation timing a little bit. So now you can see we have our Ducks versus Bulldogs text animated in addition to our game day text. But when you go back to this initial design, you can see there's a little bit of a tilt to the game day and the Ducks versus Bulldogs text. So I want to make sure I incorporate that into our design. That's also super easy to do. We're simply going to select our game day text, and you'll notice there are some different checkboxes that we can check over here. We're going to find this one that looks like a cube, and we're simply going to click like that. We're going to do the exact same thing for our Ducks versus Bulldogs text. And what this does is it turns our 2D text into 3D text. So essentially we have the ability to take our text that was initially flat and angle it a bit to give it a little bit more angle. So now I'm going to select my game day layer and hit R on my keyboard. And when I do that, it gives me the option to bring up a bunch of different rotation options. Now I'm simply going to go to my X rotation right here, and you can just click on the degree sign. I'm going to type in -25. And you'll notice when I do that, it tilts my text in the X-axis direction 25 degrees, which is exactly what I want. I'm gonna do the exact same thing for my Ducks versus Bulldog text. Again, minus 25. Now, you can tell my spacing has kind of been disrupted a little bit here. I'm gonna hit P and just scale this back up in the way that I wanted it. And now we're gonna hit play. And you'll notice our text animates in just the way that we wanted it. Super cool. So now that we have this text animated, I'm then gonna go on to our background. Now here you'll notice he has a drone shot of Mercedes-Benz Stadium and then the background animated in. Now unfortunately we're not like Oregon football where we have drones readily available to go down and shoot the stadium ourselves. I'm gonna have to play around with some things a little bit to get this to work. I simply went on YouTube and searched for Mercedes-Benz drone shots, and I found one that might kind of work. It's this 4K drone footage courtesy of Tay the director. Super awesome. And I simply just opened this up full frame and took a screenshot of it. I know this is by no means ideal, but sometimes when you're not working directly with an organization, you have to try and play around with some things to get similar assets. And so I took this screenshot here and then I pulled it into Photoshop. And so what I did essentially is just open this up in full screen, waited a second for these commands to go away, and then I'm gonna hit Command 4 and simply just take a full page screenshot. I'm then gonna take this and drag it directly into Photoshop and scale it up a bit. That looks roughly the size that we want it to be. I'm then gonna hit check and then just drag this down just like that. Now you'll notice we still have this kind of dark gradient on the top half of our image from where we screenshotted it off of YouTube. Now if you look at the original reference from Connor, it looks like he has the stadium cut out and then a good bit of sky space that he can use to pan up the camera, which is exactly what we want. So I'm simply going to go here to Photoshop, make sure my frame size is nice and tall so we have room to pan the camera up for that effect. And once I have that, I'm gonna simply create a layer mask, hit B, scale up my brush size a little bit, make sure my flow is down to about 16, and turn my hardness all the way down. I can then just simply erase that black area and make it a nice smooth transition between the foreground and the background. I might even just configure this a little bit to match. That looks pretty good to me. I've combined these two layers, the background layer and the foreground layer, into one singular layer. And then I'm gonna hit Edit, Sky Replacement. What this allows me to do is Photoshop will automatically detect the different elements in our image and replace the sky automatically. I can then choose from some of the different presets that they have. And these are all super cool. I really like the way that this looks. And so I'm simply gonna hit File, save as a copy, and then just save that as Mercedes-Benz 2 as a PNG. I'm then gonna go back to After Effects and drag in that new Mercedes-Benz PNG and simply drag that into my Layers tab. I'm gonna delete the old layer and then position this new layer in the way that I want it to be. I can then go back to my character window and change our text back to white since we have good contrast. And I might even scale these up as well. So I can adjust the scale by selecting both layers and hitting S and simply dragging these up. I'm then going to hit P and then just drag that game day text down again. So now you can see a rough estimate of where things are at. We have the text animated in, super great. Now I want to be able to capture this front player element as well. And this is one that's a little bit tricky to do on our own. We don't actually have any football players to film in like style specifically for this design. And so we're gonna have to try and manipulate some things a little bit. I did some digging online and I ended up finding a image of a football player that's relatively similar. This isn't a video clip, but it's fairly a similar process as it would be if it was a video or an image. Now I'm going to open up Photoshop, create a new document, simply do 1080 by 1080. I'm then going to drag this football player in, and you can see his legs are going to be cut off. So we're going to have to do some maneuvering here. I'm then going to go and hit select subject, and that looks like it did a pretty good job. I'm going to hit select and mask and turn my opacity all the way up. It looks like there is some fringing around the hair. I'm going to use a brush tool and simply try to clean it up as best as possible. Now, granted, if we were doing this for a football program, we'd have the ability to get nice clean background shots, and we wouldn't have to worry about the hair looking as janky as it does, but that is just kind of what you deal with when you work as an independent graphic designer. Just cleaning up a few of these details. And it doesn't look perfect, but overall it looks like it'll be good enough to get us through this design. I'm then gonna go into After Effects and simply drag in this new PNG, and then we can drag him into our layer. I wanna make sure he's above the text. And I actually might scale up our composition a little bit because it looks like we're not going to be able to fit the football player and the text in the background. So I'm simply going to hit composition settings, and I'm going to change the height to about 1200 just to give us a little bit more space. I'm then going to take both of these and drag them down a little bit, and then take our text layers and drag them up. So now when we hit play, you'll notice we have our game day text popping up. Might scale that up a little bit more. And then adjust the position as necessary. Now, if you go back to the reference video, you'll notice that he has this game day text animated in behind all of these different elements. The other thing that you'll notice is he has a good bit of motion blur on his text. So that's something I'm going to try to recreate real quick. So we can do that simply by hitting the check down on this box underneath the bouncing ball effect. And we'll see what impact that has. Now you can still see our text is still visible when we first begin the graphic, and we want to make sure that's not the case. And so I'm going to simply go through and create a clipping mask and hide it when it is here. So this mask is currently set to add. I'm just gonna hit subtract. And now when we hit play, the text will only pop up in areas that clipping mask is not available. Again, all I did was went up, selected my layer, selected this rectangle tool, and then dragged it to roughly that area, and then set my mask to subtract. Now I have all of the parts complete for the first part of this motion graphic, and now it's time to add in a little bit more animation. So we can do this simply by going to Layer, New, and Camera. I'm gonna hit OK. And here we can adjust the actual camera position. Now, quick note, our camera will only affect 3D elements, so we wanna make sure that we convert all of our existing elements to 3D elements so that we can pan and zoom as we need. So we can simply do this by clicking in here. Now you'll notice our text disappeared behind the Mercedes-Benz image. We can simply do that fix that by clicking on those layers, hitting P, and then adjusting the Z axis position. And I'm going to do the same thing for ducks versus bulldogs. And now that we have that, we're going to need to scale this down. And then reconfigure. And that is appearing just as we want it to. So now that we have our camera, we can do some cool things like zoom in and zoom out. So for example, we can zoom in, zoom out, but we can also pan our camera. So you can see all of our 3D elements are interacting in the real scene. And so we can play around with some keyframes here to create some cool effects. And so what I'm going to start off by doing is, I believe if we go back to the reference, there's a quick zoom in at the very beginning. And to recreate this, we can simply go to our camera and choose position. And then right as the text is beginning to come in, we can just simply do a slight zoom. So we'll hit play, and you'll notice there's a quick zoom in. Now, their animation on the zoom was a little bit faster than ours. That's super easy to do. We're just gonna click and drag this keyframe in, just like that. If you ever wanna make keyframes a little bit smoother and less rigid, select both of them and then click this graph editor. That'll show you a visual representation of all of your animations. And then from here, I'm simply going to select all of the points and then choose this Easy Ease In. And what that does is essentially just takes my animations and makes them a little bit smoother. We zoom in, and then the camera kind of tilts up. And so we want to recreate that camera tilt effect. So to do this, I'm going to simply go to my camera, hit R to bring up our camera rotation, go a couple of seconds out, and then adjust our X rotation, just like that. And that is just to the point where our text is no longer visible. So that looks pretty good. Now you notice there's all this stuff in the background, this missing space here. And then from here, I'm gonna hit Layer, New, Solid, and then just select this dark blue, something like that. So you can see it gets a little bit janky here in the corners, and we'll go back and try and fix that in a second. But I wanna play the full animation through for you. Something like that. It's looking pretty good so far. Now I want to make that camera animation smooth as well. So I'm going to simply go here to my graph editor, select these points and hit Easy Ease In as well. And now you can see a little bit more of a smooth camera pan. Now there's tons of different ways I could go to approach fixing these weird lines here. And I might just try to add a feather effect to the actual background image itself. I'm gonna select my layer and then open up the pen tool and go here and do a rough outline of the area that I'm trying to remove. And then once I have my mask selected, I can then go through and add some feather. And what that will do is kind of soften the edge there. So now I have that mask applied. I wanna make sure that I can tweak my mask because as you can go back and see, it's completely removing all of the stadium, which is not what we wanted. I'll just go to the point where the mask is working well, which is about here. And I'm gonna choose mask path and mask expansion and set a keyframe there. I wanna go to a point where I want to adjust my mask path and then drag these points down. Again, go here. Just like that. I'm gonna hit play and you'll notice the effect actually looks really good up to this point. So it looks like he has the Oregon logo here. So to do that, I'm simply going to drag this and scale this down just like that. Now we want this to be a 3D element as well. And we need to play with the position a little bit, just to get it positioned the way we want to. We can hit R and play with the X rotation, just to get it facing the right way. And then it looks like it's getting clipped a little bit by this feather mask. I'm just gonna bring the position out. And then down, just like that. So now as we go back and hit play, you'll notice our Oregon logo animates in just like that. Now we might need to slow down our camera just a little bit. I'm gonna add in one small piece of motion blur to our Oregon logo. That's looking pretty good. And let's go back to our reference image real quick. And so you'll notice when the camera pans back down, the text is no longer there. So we want to recreate that effect as well. So we just did a small little camera tilt. I'm just gonna copy this camera rotation spot and put it back. So essentially all we're doing is zooming back down. So you can literally just select this keyframe, hit Command C, and then hit Command V where you want it to go. So you can see now we have some camera motion going there and back. Now you notice I have it set to easy ease. So there's a little bit of a up and then right back down immediately. Let's hit Command C and Command V just to give ourselves a little bit of time on this Oregon logo. So now when we hit play, we have a little bit more time there. Now you notice our mask is affecting us again. So we're just simply gonna wanna go back to our mask that we applied to the Mercedes-Benz cutout. And we're gonna want to tweak that as we zoom back down. And so set an initial keyframe here just to preserve our mask settings. And then drag this mask down a little bit. Just like that. And so you can see our stadium comes back just like that. Super cool. Now, last thing, we want to make sure our text is not here when we come back. And so we can simply just select our text and hit Command-Shift-D and delete the layers past when we pan up. So when we pan back down, the text will no longer be there. Just like that. And so now I'm going to play our animation all the way through. So that is a super quick summary of how to recreate this Oregon motion graphic. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. It really helps the channel a whole lot. We'll be putting out a lot more motion graphic tutorials just like this one. So if you really enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel to make sure you don't miss out on those future videos. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.